Another way to work is to use the source and record monitors to do your editing. This is kind of a more traditional method of editing. So let's take a look at how this plays out. Basically, I've created a new sequence up here called snowboarding source record. I just went up to clip and chose new sequence and then typed in the information. Let's open up a clip into the source window by double clicking on it. And you'll see I've got a new clip here. You can hit play right at the beginning. We'll just mark an in, and marking an in is exactly the same as marking an in Final Cut Pro. You just use the I key. You can also map that anywhere you want. I've got a keyboard setting where the I is actually mapped to the L and the O key is mapped to the colon key, but I think for most people, I and O are where they expect the in and out buttons to be. We'll mark an in right at the very beginning of the clip, and I'm going to hit the L key out of JKL to play forward. And as soon as he lands and finishes his little exclamation, we'll mark an out right there. So now we've chosen the in and the out for this clip. For us to get it into the timeline, we use one of these two arrows, the splice in arrow or the overwrite arrow. These can be mapped to your keyboard, or you can use them from this spot right here. Right now, there's nothing in the timeline, so whichever one of these two we can use, they will each act right now identically. So I'm going to cut that in. Then let's go to another clip and find an in and an out point. So I'm just hitting the L key, and I want to find that moment just before he comes on screen. So I'm going to hold down the K key and the J key at the same time, and what that's going to do is go backwards at 1/8 speed slow-mo, basically scrubbing. So there it is, and once I take my hand off the J key, leaving my finger on the K key, the timeline pauses. So now I've got the exact frame before he comes on screen, and I can either click here in the timeline, the mark in button, and then I can play forward. And when he goes off frame, I want to get the last just as he's going off frame. So I'm going to again scrub backwards by K and J, and then forward by K and L. And if you wanted to, you could even use the left and right arrow buttons, forward and back. Right now I'm clicking the left arrow key and the right arrow key, and there's the last frame, and then I can mark an out. I'm going to use the keyboard by hitting the O and mark my out, and then I'm going to hit the red arrow key. Again, there's nothing to ripple down here, so hitting red and yellow does the same thing. Now let's put a clip in between these two clips. And I'm going to show you an interesting thing. You don't have to mark ins or outs in anything to be able to do an edit. You can simply find the shot you want. Like right there is pretty cool. Leave your timeline locator where you want the shot to start. Down here in sequence, leave your timeline locator, and then just hit splice in. And you've done an edit basically without making any marks. You've spliced that shot in the middle of your two other clips. And that's how to basically do most of your source record editing. Pretty simple, pretty standard. Another thing I want to talk about is the effect that the caps lock has on Avid, because it's different than Final Cut Pro. If you hold down the caps lock key as you're moving through the timeline with cap locks on, you can hear kind of this digital noise. If you press the left and right arrow key, every time you do that, you hear one frame of audio. To me, it's a little bit annoying. If you're wondering why these strange noises are happening, it's because caps lock is on. So just turn that off. Or if you like that to be able to edit, find in points and out points, then you can turn caps lock on. If you ever have a question about where buttons are, go to the keyboard setting in the settings tab of your project window, hold down the K key or drag down to keyboard, open that up, and here are all your keyboard settings, so you know mark in is on the I key, mark out is on the O key, there's JKL there. If you need to clear your in, clear your out, or clear mark ins, then you can find them right there. There's mark clip, which is marking it out. That's kind of like the X key on Final Cut Pro. For example, if I want to mark this clip into out, I would hit the T key, and that selects that. Same thing, you place the timeline locator someplace in the middle, hit the T key, and that marks the clip. Want to clear those endpoints? You can just hit the G key. The mark's clear. Another thing that you might want to know, for example, this is quite a long clip and I don't want to see this guy wipe out. We want to, have these guys be big pro snowboarders. So we don't want to see this wipe out. We'll just have him launch, and before his arms windmill too much, let's say this is where we want to get out of this clip. One, we can again hit the T key, which gives us our out point, our correct out at the end of the clip. Now we're going to hit the I key because we're right at that point where we want to cut away. I'm going to mark I, and now I've selected this section of the clip where it's blue here. If I want to ripple the edit, in other words, extract it, lift it, and have this section slide down, which is basically the same as doing a Shift Delete in Final Cut Pro, then you use this yellow key over here called the Extract key. If you want to lift it and leave a hole, which is kind of like just the Delete key in Final Cut Pro, then you use this red arrow key called the Lift key. See, there's the red arrow key. It's left a hole. Let's undo that. Use the yellow key, boom, and it pulls it up. And you can actually see that as the guy starts to windmill his arms, boom, we cut and we don't see him wipe out anymore. So those are some of the most important keys that you need to know. Basically, splicing in, which ripples, overwriting, which overwrites it, maintaining sync and also maintaining the exact same length of the sequence, lifting, which pulls something out, leaves a hole, and yellow extract, which lifts and then ripples the sequence, changing the length and possibly changing the sync as well. Those are the most important buttons, and all those buttons can be mapped and are mapped onto your keyboard. If you want to be able to hit those as buttons quickly and painlessly, then use the Z key for lift, the X key for extract, the V key for splice in, and the B key for overwrite. There's a couple more points that I want to explain here. One is the Replace Edit button. So let's take a look at the Replace Edit button. So hear this audio right here. Right, boom, there as the guy hits the pole. Let's say we want to take another clip. I need to find a clip that something specific happens. So this guy jumps up in the air. Boom, and then when he hits the ground here, we're going to replace this shot so that the audio from this post, him hitting this post, actually lines up with him landing this jump. So he's in the air, and then from the spray, that's basically where he hits, someplace in there. The way that you can do this is very cool. Again, as I showed you, if you click in the timeline, find that audio point, right there, hit the T key and it will select this entire clip. I've placed the timeline locator in my sequence right on the audio point. Again, I'm doing JKL to scrub through that. And then I've also placed the visual locator on the source side right where this guy lands at this jump. First of all, I want to turn off the audio because we don't want to erase the audio that we have down here. We only want to edit from video to video, and we want to leave the audio alone. If I were to leave the audio on here, when I do this edit, it will delete the two audio clips. We don't want to do that. We want to leave them. So I'm going to turn off audio, just have video to video, and then use the blue replace button. And now he should land this jump right on that noise if I play through. Yep, there it is. So replace edit is pretty cool in that if you've got a sound, for example, a big cymbal crash in a music edit, and you want to have a car crash, or one car smashes into the other, happen right on that cymbal crash. It's very simple. In the timeline, you place your timeline locator right on the cymbal crash. In the source side, you place your timeline locator right on the car crash where the two cars impact, and use replace edit, which is I'm finding from this fast menu right here, which gives you a bunch of other buttons. You could also map this replace button to any place on your keyboard or any place in your UI. And that's how the replace edit button works. Another thing I want to show you how to do quickly is match frame. Match frame is another one that you can add to your keyboard if you want. In Final Cut Pro, the F key is the match frame key. If you wanted to have the F key be match frame, you could certainly map it that way. Let's say we want to find a specific shot. We've got something in the timeline and we want to put that exact clip at that time back in the source window. Let's wait till his whole head is in. If we want to match frame or find this frame, we park here, and in this fast menu, we choose this button. This is the match frame button. Again, it can be mapped to your keyboard, and automatically it marks an endpoint and loads that clip into the source monitor. So that's another thing to understand is match frame. And the final thing that I want to explain before we move on to the next segment is also how JKL works to fast forward or search through clips quickly. And the way to do that is by simply hitting the L key or the J key multiple times. So the L key plays normal speed. If you hit it twice, you get double speed, and it shows you right here, it will show you 60, which is the number of frames per second that it's playing back. And you can even hear audio at 90 or triple speed. There's 90, and here's 5 times. You can still hear audio even at 5 times normal speed. Backwards, the J key once, twice, 3 times, 4 times. And that's how you can search through clips rapidly. You can also, of course, shuttle through it, just like in Final Cut Pro, using your mouse in the timeline, or down here using your mouse in the timeline.